We're back to Isaiah for this week. 2 weeks ago, we looked at the passage from Isaiah, that was chapter 55, and talked about the sort of place and welcome envisioned for those who would be returning from exile. Now, this passage is a few chapters earlier, but it is from the same context and setting. The people are in exile, but they're hearing these words of promise and return. Now, if you read this month's newsletter article already, you may know that I quoted one of the verses from this passage in there, and we'll be talking a little bit about that, but also looking at this whole passage, because there's even more there that adds to kind of the depth of this lesson. Beginning with the beginning, we hear of the amazing things that God has done already. And I don't know if we really stop to do that enough, honestly. Stop to just realize all the things God has done and the scope of God's work in our world. So here we recall that. God making a way in the sea, bringing down chariots and armies that were in pursuit. And this, of course, is referring to the Exodus, right? Major event in the history of God's people, in the history of our faith. And again, being reminded of the amazing things that God has done already. But then, do not remember the former things? Yeah. Do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. What? But the Exodus is right there. Why would this verse follow those last two? Well, we do have to remember where we are, take a look at the context. This is written from exile, looking ahead to an eventual return home. Now, what would that return look like? What stories have kids heard about that home? What have they grown up hearing about and maybe expecting? What stories do we hear about the good old days? Yes, there we go. There is a big difference between history or heritage and nostalgia. We do need to remember where we come from and learn all about our history and heritage, the good, the bad, and everything in between, because that does inform who we are now, and it helps us to understand who we've been. But expecting for some day in the future to live up to a memory of some former event isn't really helpful in that for a couple of reasons. One, nostalgia often embellishes or focuses only on the best of the days being remembered. It often isn't really history in that way. And two, the future isn't going to look like the past. And that's a reality that we don't often acknowledge, or maybe don't want to think about, but new means new. And hearing this promise of something new can sound different depending on where we are, too, like where we're hearing this message from. If we're comfortable, if we're okay with the way things are, it's maybe not so great to hear that things are going to change, right? A new thing? Nah, we're fine. No, thank you. But if we're not, if we're in a place of despair or struggling, change might mean hope, right? A new thing? Yes, please. And again, it is good to remember our history and to understand where God has been with us through that, to know what we've done and what we're capable of. It's important to hold on to the link in the chain of generations that have brought us to this point. And it's even good to have a list of ideas based on our experience as we move forward. But we can't get stuck there in that past, so much so that we're closed off to trying something we haven't before, just because it's something we haven't tried before. or to confuse heritage and history with something else. Letting go of the idea of the good old days is a powerful thing. It has the power to turn the people from that and open them up to the possibilities that God will be bringing them. This is the God who is powerful enough to part the seas and bring about the Exodus, who made all things, and who is going to do something new once more. The people will need to be open to moving forward. We need to be open to moving forward too, because the future isn't going to look like the past we remember. And it never really has. Even the things we remember fondly were once new. Everything, really. I mean, one of the most traditional Christmas carols, Silent Night, right? That was first sung at a Christmas Eve service in 1818 because the organ had been flooded and they needed something they could sing with a guitar. That's new. And, you know, we're in Foxborough, so professional football, right? 1892, less than 30 years after the invention of the game itself. Something new. And there have only been how many Super Bowls? Like 56, you know? That's relatively new. The Lutheran tradition itself, well, if you go back to 1517, it's 505 years, but that was something very new in its day too. And this congregation at one point was something new. New things have the potential to be something really amazing. Even if we're okay with how things are, or want them to go back to how they were, we can't discount the possibility of what might be. And we're reminded of that in this lesson for today. We do have to sometimes let go of the way it's always been for that to happen. Otherwise, things will only go as they always have. We're coming out of a pretty big era of our own. The past 2 years have been hard. Losses, quarantines, restrictions, canceled events or programs, and we're emerging from that in a very, concrete, real way. I've heard a lot of people here and elsewhere talk about getting back to the way things were. And I understand that. I want to get to something that feels normal again, too. But I'm not sure it'll go back to the way things were. We're going to be in a post-pandemic world, not a pre-pandemic one. And we've changed. In 2 normal years, we changed. So, of course, we have with years on this level. And that's okay. That's good, in fact, because we need to grow and change. But we're not alone in that either. We have this amazing, wonderful, powerful God who guides us and reminds us of that. And we can be open to the new things that God has in store. The lesson ends with a vision of paradise, really. Wild animals honoring God, an oasis of life where there once was none. God's people coming together, reminded that something new is about to begin. Something new is about to begin. And we get to be part of that.